Friends, 4 individuals came to the king's court and made a shocking and sensational accusation that a woman was committing immoral acts with a dog to satisfy her desires. Upon hearing this, the king became furious and immediately summoned the woman to the court. When the woman arrived, she vehemently declared that these accusations were lies. She said, "Your Majesty, I have not shown my honor to any man for the past 2 years." The king ordered his royal midwife to investigate the matter to uncover the truth. The midwife prepared with a serious expression and began inspecting the woman's body. As soon as she started, the woman screamed in fear and trembled, saying, "What is happening?" The midwife tried to calm her down, saying, "This is necessary to prove your innocence." The woman, with her head lowered, pleaded, "I swear to Allah, this is all a lie. I haven't committed any such sin." But the midwife ignored her pleas and continued the examination. After a while, the midwife noticed certain marks on the woman's body. Upon careful examination, she said, "Your Majesty, this woman is lying. There are marks on her body that indicate she has been with an animal." A stunned silence fell over the court. The king's face showed a mixture of anger and disbelief as he stared at the woman. He asked in a stern tone, "Are these accusations true? Why did you hide the truth?" The woman, trembling, replied, "Your Majesty, I am not lying. These accusations are false." The king took a deep breath and asked, "If this is a lie, why are you so frightened? Why is your voice trembling?" The woman rubbed her hands together and said, "The marks on my body are the truth." Upon hearing this, those present in the court were struck with astonishment. The king, in a stern voice, demanded, "Tell the truth. Who is responsible for this?" The woman, with a trembling voice, said, "It is the person who brought me here. He is the one who did this to me. He kept doing something, and he was present in the court." As soon as this was heard, a wave spread through the court. All eyes turned towards the man upon whom the woman had accused. Every person's gaze was fixed on each other, and the king's anger intensified further. He immediately summoned the men who had brought complaints against this woman. These 4 men were dismissed and brought before the court. They avoided meeting each other's eyes, and a wave of fear ran through their hearts. The king's eyes were filled with anger, and he appeared like a storm. Looking at each man individually, the king asked, "Did you falsely accuse this woman?" For a few moments, complete silence fell. Finally, one man slowly said, "Your Majesty, we have done nothing wrong. We heard this accusation from someone else." The king's face turned red with anger, and he roared, "So, without investigation, you are leveling such a serious accusation based on someone else's words?" The men exchanged glances, but no one said anything. The king's sharp eyes made it evident that they would be forced to tell the truth. Finally, one man gathered courage and said, "Your Majesty, that person is present in the court, but we do not recognize him. We only know that he was involved in the woman's life." Upon hearing this, the king gave a terrible order and commanded, "Immediately find this person and present him before me." A few moments later, the court doors opened, and that man was brought in. His face had turned pale with fear, and he could not even muster the courage to step into the court. The king glared at him and asked, "Are you the person who did all this?" Complete silence fell over the court. The man, trembling, replied, "Your Majesty, this is all a lie. I have done no such thing." The king's eyes were a storm of anger as he said, "If you are innocent, then why are you afraid? Why is your voice trembling?" Hearing this, the man became even more frightened. Everyone in the court began whispering in amazement and speculation. The king once again announced, "We will conduct a complete investigation of this matter, and the truth will be determined. If this accusation proves false, the accuser will not be spared punishment." Hearing this, murmurs began in the court. Everyone was eager to see what the outcome of this matter would be. Earlier, slogans were raised in the king's name, and his decisions were praised. Finally, the man who had been called on the stand to preside over a verdict of guilty had. Now, everyone in the court sat in a state of worry because this matter was far more complicated. Everyone wanted to see the decision regarding this case. Shortly afterward, the king's order. The order was carried out, and the woman who was being accused of such disgraceful acts was brought to the court. The king's eyes instinctively turned towards the woman, who was covering herself in a white sheet, even hiding her eyes. She silently stood in front of the king. As soon as she arrived, murmurs began to spread through the court. People started talking about her, saying all sorts of things. When the king looked at her, he was astonished. He wondered how such a pious woman could commit such acts. The king, looking towards her, said, "O woman, we have received complaints about you that you behave immorally with dogs. Is this true? These 4 men claim that you are a courtesan, Have you forgotten that such acts are forbidden in our kingdom? Anyone who engages in such activities, whether man or woman, is sentenced to 10 years of imprisonment. Are you unaware of this?" Hearing this, the woman burst into tears. The king was baffled by her behavior, as instead of answering, she simply cried. The king watched her for a while, but she continued to sob. After some time, the king stood up from his seat and immediately ordered a soldier to summon the royal midwife so she could thoroughly examine the woman and reveal the truth to everyone. Soon the royal midwife appeared in court. The king explained the entire matter to her, and the woman was taken inside the palace for a full examination. Everyone in the court anxiously awaited the midwife's findings. The king kept a close eye on the 4 men, who stood silently with their heads lowered. After some time, the royal midwife came out screaming. Her cries startled the entire court, and even the king quickly rose from his seat. The midwife's condition suggested that she wanted to reveal some truth to the king, but was hesitant to speak in front of the court. The king motioned with his hand, ordering her to remain silent, and sent her back inside the palace. The king himself left the court and went into the palace. Once again, murmurs filled the court. Some people spoke ill of the woman, while others praised her. After a while, the king emerged from the palace with a serious and stern expression, indicating the gravity of the matter. Behind him, the woman, still wrapped in her white sheet, came out as well. The king cast a fierce glance at the 4 men and said, "Let 3 of you leave the court. Only the first man will stay. You will be informed of the decision later." The 3 men, exchanging fearful glances with each other, quietly left the court. The king then turned to the first man and said, "You claim that there is a dog in this woman's house, and that you witnessed everything with your own eyes. So, tell me, what color is the dog?" The color drained from his face, and everyone in the court began staring at him intently. Even the king was scrutinizing him closely. When he did not respond, the king said in a stern tone, "Speak, what color is the dog?" On being asked again, the man stammered and said, "Your Majesty, the dog is white." Hearing this answer, the court fell silent. The king stared at the man thoughtfully, nodded, and had him sent out. The second man was then called in, and when asked the same question, he replied, "The dog is sandy-colored." The king nodded again, but the people in the court watched him with suspicious eyes. When the third man was questioned, he said, "The dog is henna-colored." Finally, the fourth man was asked, and he said, "The dog is black." Upon hearing this, the king ordered his soldiers to bring the dog to the court immediately. The order was carried out promptly, and the 4 men were lined up in the court again. A while later, the soldiers brought the dog into the court. The dog was neither sandy-colored, nor white, nor black, nor henna-colored, because Allah had created the dog with a mix of colors. Seeing the dog, the 4 men grew pale with fear, and their faces revealed that their lie had been exposed. The king turned toward the woman, who was staring at him with pleading eyes. This time the king asked her, "You claim that you have done nothing wrong with the dog. Then tell me, why are these 4 men accusing you of such things?" With a trembling voice, the woman said, "Your Majesty, I have wronged no one. I live quietly in my home and never meet or speak to any strange men, yet these 4 men are determined to harm me. I do not understand what sin I have committed that has caused them to treat me this way. I am already burdened by my sorrows. My marriage lasted only a year before my husband passed away, and since then, people have been trying to take advantage of me." Hearing the woman's words, silence spread across the court. The king stared deeply at the 4 men, while the woman continued to cry. She said, "I rarely leave my home without reason, yet people still criticize me for going out. I know it is difficult for a widow like me to live in this world. I have no brother, no father, and, now, no husband to support me. That is why I have turned to Allah. I share all my secrets and prayers with him. My home had many needs, but despite that, I never took any wrongful steps that would lead me to sin. Many people respected me for my piety. Those who once tried to exploit my helplessness eventually stopped. But even now there are some people who cannot bear to see a widow live in peace, and these 4 men are among them. Your Majesty, during my husband's life I never stepped out of the house. He handled all the affairs, and I took care of him and the household. But when my husband passed away due to a severe illness, I confined myself within the 4 walls of my home and devoted myself to worship. Then, due to a very urgent matter, I had to leave my house. On my way back, I found a small, injured puppy lying on the road. I grabbed it. When I looked around, there was no arrangement for water anywhere, and the puppy seemed thirsty. For Allah's sake, I picked up the injured animal and brought it home. I took care of it, applied ointment to its wounds, and gradually, it began to recover and became attached to me. Its presence in the house gave me a sense of companionship. After finishing my prayers, I would share my thoughts with it, as though it were a human being listening to me. The puppy also stayed inside the house and never went outside. Then one day, I had to leave the house for some urgent work. Since there was no man in the house, I had to take care of all the small and big errands myself. Whenever I passed through the market, these 4 men would stand by the road, calling out to me and staring at me with inappropriate looks, which I disliked intensely. One day, things went too far. These men followed me all the way to my house. I was terrified and ran inside, locking the door behind me. Even from inside, I could hear their laughter and mocking voices outside. But it didn't stop there. Whenever I stepped outside, these men would harass me, call out to me, and make inappropriate comments. One day, the situation escalated. I was at home with the puppy when suddenly a man came to my door and said he wanted to spend time with me. Hearing his words, I was horrified. I couldn't comprehend who he was. I sent him away from the door, saying, "This is not a brothel where you can spend time as you please." The man ignored my rebuke, but left without further argument. "Your Majesty." I didn't see his face, but I am certain he was one of these 4 men. The next day, another man came to my door, knocking in a similar manner, and shamelessly propositioned me, saying he had fallen in love with me and wanted to spend time with me. He even offered me as much wealth as I desired in return. I couldn't understand who this man was. I approached the door and replied loudly, "If you love me, then marry me, but I will not engage in any wrongful act with you." As soon as I said this, the man replied, "I have no issue marrying you, but I already have 4 wives, all of whom have brought great wealth into my household. If I marry you, my life could become burdensome. I am willing to bestow wealth upon you, but I cannot marry you." Hearing this, I refused him outright and sent him away from my door. "Your Majesty, after this incident, I became too afraid to step outside." I confined myself to my home and cried before Allah, praying earnestly for divine help to protect me from these men. After that day, people started gathering outside my house, throwing stones at it and shouting obscene accusations like, "You are an immoral woman, a courtesan." They would hurl all kinds of vile insults at me. "Your Majesty." Leaving my home had become unbearable for me. I couldn't understand why all this was happening to me when I was innocent. I had done nothing wrong. The woman broke into tears again as she recounted her story. Seeing her cry, the king turned his gaze toward the 4 men, who were now staring at the ground, visibly ashamed and flustered. They said, "Your Majesty, this woman is lying. None of this is true. It was all just a joke." Hearing this, the king became furious and declared, "The liar here is not this woman, but all of you." When the dog was brought into the court, the 4 men and the villagers were stunned. The dog's color was not what the men had described. The 4 men realized that their lies had been exposed. They fell to their knees before the king, joining their hands, and pleaded, "Your Majesty, please forgive us." He turned to the judges. "Execution," he said, "sentence of death." But the king, with an angry glare, replied, "You tried to tarnish the reputation of a virtuous woman. Now, will you confess the truth yourselves, or shall I pronounce your punishment immediately?" Terrified, they confessed, "Your Majesty, please have mercy." It is true that our intentions were impure. When we learned that this woman was young, widowed, without the protection of a man, and also beautiful, we thought we could take advantage of her situation. We approached her many times with inappropriate intentions, but she always refused us. One day, when I went to her house with a proposition to spend the night with her, I heard a dog's barking from inside the house. I was surprised to find that she was not entirely alone in the house. She had a dog with her. That's when an evil thought came to my mind. Why not ruin her reputation in the entire village by spreading rumors about her and the dog? So I, along with my 3 friends, began to spread lies about this virtuous woman. We told everyone that she lived with a dog in her house, hiding it, and that she had inappropriate relations with the animal. The villagers believed our lies and started accusing her of immoral behavior as well. "Your Majesty, please forgive us." "And you too, virtuous woman, please forgive us," the king sternly replied. "No, your crime is unforgivable. What you have done is not a mistake. It is a grave sin. Slandering a pious and innocent woman is a crime that can only be punished with death." Following Islamic law and justice, the king ordered the execution of the 4 men for their heinous actions and the harm they had caused. The king ordered that the 4 men be punished, and the villagers stoned them to death. This incident serves as a testament to the protection of a woman's honor and dignity, and the help of Allah in safeguarding her from false accusations. One day, a man came to this woman's door, offering her an immoral proposition. When she rejected him repeatedly, he became obsessed with her. Eventually, this matter reached the king, who conducted a thorough investigation and declared the woman innocent and honorable. The king then announced that the woman would be acquitted, and the 4 men were sentenced to death in front of the village. These men were hanged upside down and killed. After this decision, the 4 men were forced to admit their wrongdoing. This event teaches us that Allah protects His righteous servants and saves them from false accusations. Allah gives us the strength to avoid all evil and guides us to always follow the path of truth and justice. Amin.